3 months have passed since the Frontier Championship, with Ash having returned to the battle junction while Scott prepares for their match, having promised that this delay will be more than worth it for what he has planned. Thankfully, Ash has planned to occupy his time, as due to the tournament being televised, dozens of trainers have started taking the Battle Frontier Challenge, with Ash being the brain they all want to battle. In light of this, and his title as Champion Brain, Ash is quickly promoted to the 7th Brain of Kanto, taking Brandon's spot as the de facto head of their group. Though at first the boy is a bit put off by this prospect, especially since his success has meant a demotion for Annabelle and Brandon, he is met with nothing but support from his fellow brains, with Annabelle teasing that being bumped down to 5th just means she'll get more chances to battle than Ash, so she can surpass him at the next Frontier Championship, while Brandon calls the appointment wise on Scott's part, telling Ash that he has more than earned his place at the top. Luckily, even as the final brain, Ash is still given plenty of opportunities to battle, thanks to this influx of challenges, with each being of a high enough level to have fought their way up through the other 6 battle facilities. This keeps him from stagnating like he was at the start of his tenure, as his opponents often keep him on his toes, while allowing him to learn from them just as much as they do from him. On top of this, Ash has redoubled his training while not waiting for challenges, constantly aware of the fact that any day now, Scott may call on him to battle, and knowing that he might not get another shot at Ho-Oh, he can't afford to squander this one. Finally, the day arrives, with Scott calling all of the brains to Battle Frontier HQ, and while at first Ash does not recognize the cause of the summons, being more surprised by the fact they are meeting in person rather than over the phone like they usually do, when he arrives at the skyscraper in Celadon, all doubt is stripped from his mind as he sees the roof has been transformed into a massive arena. Heading up in the elevator with the other Kanto brains, Ash soon sees Scott standing in the center of the arena, though he is far from the only person here, as up in the stands, Ash sees all his family, friends, and even the odd rival like Richie and Morrison. Up the back, Ash catches sight of the Sinnoh brains, each surveying the battlefield with interest, and as his eyes pass over each of them, he spots Paul at the very back, Chimchar by his side, or rather, Monferno, who the young Junction Master is pleased to see looks much healthier than it did last time they met. At this moment, Scott demands Ash's attention once more, explaining this will be the site of their exhibition match, adding that if Ash is open to it, he'd like to make it a full battle. Grinning, Ash replies that he's fine with that, causing the Frontier boss to smile as he returns to one side of the field, while Ash moves to the other, activating his Poketch and transferring in the 5 Pokemon he thinks will best help him take down Scott. When they're in position, Jamero floats into view, projecting a scoreboard like the sort used in the various Pokemon League conferences, before telling the trainers to bring out their first Pokemon, with Ash choosing Heracross like their first battle, and Scott unveiling a Pokemon Ash has never seen before. Still grinning, Scott explains this Pokemon is called Ferrothorn, and it's from the far-off Unova region, a place Ash is unfamiliar with, but which Scott claims may one day receive a battle frontier of its own. However, that is for another time. What matters now is their battle, with Scott taking the first move by calling for spikes. As he does so, Ash calls for a Focus Punch, which is able to charge unabated, as Ferrothorn shoots off a volley of barbs which bury themselves on Ash's side of the field. Once Focus Punch is ready, Heracross flies forward, striking Ferrothorn in what Ash can only assume is its chin, and causing it to shriek metallically at the super effective hit. However, to the boys' dismay, Heracross also lets out a pain noise at the moment of impact, revealing one of Ferrothorn's many spikes embedded in its hand, as Scott explains that Ferrothorn's ability is called Iron Barbs, meaning each time Heracross hits it, it'll be hurt as well. Nonetheless, Ash declares in that case they'll just have to take it out with one all-or-nothing finishing blow, calling for a super-powered Focus Punch. Chittering determinedly, the Battle Beetle begins readying its attack, while Scott capitalizes on this delay to lay down a second set of spikes. Finally, Heracross finishes preparing its Focus Punch, and so an Ash's Cry lunges forward, striking Ferrothorn with all its might and sending the Thorn Pod Pokemon soaring backwards. However, thanks to Iron Barbs, Ferrothorn is able to wrap one of its thorny feet into Heracross's carapace, damaging it and bringing it along for the ride. By now, Ferrothorn is looking much the worse for wear, with Ash believing one more hit should be more than enough to dispatch it, though it seems Scott has had much the same idea, with him deciding that if Ferrothorn must go down, it won't be going alone. To this end, he calls for an explosion, and with Heracross unable to extricate itself from its opponent, it is a ground zero of the explosion, taking it out with the Unovan Steel type and proving that Scott isn't messing around. Next up for Scott is Tyranitar, with the Frontier boss informing Ash that while Ferrothorn is a great pal, it's his weakest Pokemon, so from here on in, he'll be going all out. In response, Ash chooses Kingler, though to his horror, when the King Crab lands on the field, Ferrothorn's spikes activate, impaling the water type's feet, legs, and underbelly in a brutal testament not only to Scott's power, but to his forward planning. All the same, Ash tells his old friend not to let this get to it, calling for a Crab Hammer, while Scott has Tyranitar meet it with Stone Edge, this time manifested as a pair of rocky daggers which clash against King Kingler's claws. This quickly becomes a slugfest, as the two Pokemon appear comparable in power, with Crabhammer and Stone Edge striking each other repeatedly, while occasionally one of them manages to get in a lucky hit that circumvents the opponent's counter and strikes them head on. Figuring the best thing he can do is support Kingler, Ash calls out his encouragement, with the stoic Crab drawing hard from this as it continues to strike back against the pseudo-legendary Tyranitar. Fortunately, Kingler does have one advantage, a type advantage to be specific, with its water-type moves slowly eroding the rock daggers, until finally, when Crabhammer and Stone Edge clash one last time, the rocky blade shatters, leaving the armor Pokemon stunned and allowing Kingler to get in a perfectly placed uppercut which sends Tyranitar into the air, before crashing down hard on its back, unconscious. Now technically at a numbers disadvantage, Scott's third Pokemon is his Garchomp, another new face to Ash, the one who quickly proves itself deserving of a place on Scott's team, as it fires off a Draco Meteor, which Kingler cannot avoid and just barely withstands, leaving it vulnerable to the follow-up Giga Impact, which drives the King Crab into the back wall, knocking it out. Recognizing Garchomp as a bruiser, Ash decides to fight bulk with bulk, bringing out Snorlax, whose ice punches quickly play havoc on the land shark, causing Scott to comment that he now knows how Greta must have felt during their match. Nonetheless, being a strategic battler, Scott recalls Garchomp after the second quad effective Ice Punch, swapping in Metagross, who was able to resist the Arctic Strike before retaliating with a Hammer Arm, which is almost as devastating to Snorlax as its hits were to Garchomp. However, instead of discouraging Ash and Snorlax, this only fuels their tenacious natures, with the young Junction Master calling for a Hyper Beam, which blasts Metagross, though to Ash's surprise, does less damage than he would have expected, with Scott commenting that his big brain bot resists normal type moves. In fact, if Ash hasn't taught Snorlax any new moves since their match at the Battle Arena, then Metagross resists everything Snorlax has in its repertoire. Unfortunately, this isn't the only problem Ash must now contend with, as thanks to the drawback of Hyper Beam, Snorlax has to recharge, allowing Metagross to get in a free Hammer Arm, much to the sleeping Pokemon's discomfort. As a matter of fact, this hit does so much damage that sleeping seems to be Snorlax's only option, with Ash calling for a rest to buy him some time to come up with a strategy. However, it seems that Frothorn's spikes aren't only useful as an entry hazard, as when Snorlax attempts to lie down on the barbed ground, it cannot get comfortable, preventing it from resting, and thus allowing Metagross to finish it off with another Hammer Arm, swinging things definitively in Scott's favor. Needing some serious firepower to deal with the Iron Leg Pokemon, Ash's next choice is Heatran, though here he receives a nasty shock, as when the Fire Steel type touches down, it bellows in pain. Casually, Scott informs Ash that Spikes is a ground type move, meaning Heatran and Pikachu are both especially susceptible to it, with Ash feeling a chill run down his spine as he realizes that Scott predicted at least 1/3 of his team before the battle began, and was able to plan for it. If that's the case, what other traps could he have laid? Thankfully, before Ash can plunge into self-doubt, Pikachu makes an encouraging noise on his shoulder, while on the field, Heatran similarly rumbles its faith in its trainer, clearly conveying that even with Scott's traps in play, the two of them are still willing to face it for Ash, and more than that they are confident they can adapt to any other surprises Scott may have for them and beat him with the power of their teamwork. Feeling bolstered by this, Ash calls for a Magma Storm, which is more than enough to blow Metagross away in one hit. This forces Scott to bring back in Garchomp, who readies an Earthquake in an attempt to do what Spikes couldn't, and felt the legendary Lava Dome Pokemon. However, recognizing how dangerous this could be, Ash recalls Heatran at the last moment, bringing in Sceptile as his penultimate Pokemon, with the Grass Kicker looking cool as it shrugs off the Spikes damage, then places a twig in its mouth, all the while eyeing up Garchomp as if it is unimpressed. Having taken the last move, Scott offers the next one to Ash, and not wanting to waste it, the boy orders Sceptile to start strong with Solar Beam, using the move they learned in their battle with Spencer to blast Garchomp. While this is not super effective due to Garchomp's Dragon typing, mitigating its ground typing's Grass weakness, this still does a fair amount of damage, causing the Mark Pokemon to bare its teeth at Sceptile, as Scott has it retaliate with a second Draco Meteor. Thanks to having already lost some attacking power from the first usage of this move, these comets are slightly smaller than the ones used against Kingler, with Ash having Sceptile leap into the air and use Leaf Blade to cut through several of them in an attempt to shield itself from harm. Unfortunately, this only half works, as while the impact is negated by this tactic, the destruction of the meteors simply causes them to explode, turning the attack from a meteor shower into a minefield, with Sceptile being battered by the explosions. Nonetheless, it is able to stay on its feet as it touches down, even managing to recover quick enough to dash in and drive a Leaf Blade into the top of Garchomp's head. This is met with a Dragon Claw from the Land Shark, which sends the forest Pokemon skidding back, though at least here Garchomp seems to have earned Sceptile's respect, with the feeling being mutual as the pair eye each other up. As one, Ash and Scott then call for a repeat of these moves, with the two Pokemon rushing in and clashing blade against claw, though it seems this is simply a feint, with Scott revealing his true plan to be a point-blank Draco Meteor, which Sceptile will not be able to mitigate due to having its Leaf Blade locked against Garchomp's Dragon Claw. However, Ash is not the adaptability brain for nothing, and so seeing a chance to turn this to his advantage, has Sceptile wait for the last second before telling it to use Pound on Garchomp's chin. Trusting Ash's plan, Sceptile drops the Leaf Blade, allowing the Dragon Ground type to rake its claws across its belly before doing a speedy pirouette to slam its tree-like tail into Garchomp's chin. This naturally forces the marked Pokemon's jaw to clamp shut, just as the Draco Meteor is about to be fired, and with nowhere else to go, the explosive force of this Dragon-type move turns inwards, dealing super effective damage to Garchomp and knocking it out in a stunning reversal. Now it is Scott's turn to unveil his penultimate Pokemon, with him bringing back the Dragonite from their first battle. Like last time, Dragonite opens with a Fire Blast, and between this being super effective, the damage from the last battle, and the fatigue of going toe-to-toe with Garchomp, this is too much for Sceptile, who is taken out in one fell swoop. Choosing to fight fire with fire, rather literally, Ash brings back out Heatran, an interesting choice, as while it will resist Dragonite's normal flying and dragon-type moves, the orange dragon is likewise resistant to its fire-type attacks, while being immune to its ground-type moves. Thankfully, Heatran does know one move that can deal super effective damage to Dragonite, with that being Stone Edge, as with a rumble the Lava Dome Pokemon manifests chunks of stone, which it hurls at Dragonite, striking it and causing it to howl in pain. However, Scott and Dragonite aren't about to just sit back and take this, with Dragonite responding by launching a Fire Blast back at the Magma Monster, who can do little more than endure the hit before firing back. This quickly becomes a war of attrition, with it being anyone's guess as to who will fall first, as while Heatran's moves are more damaging, Dragonite has the advantage of being at full health, while the Lava Dome Pokemon has been forced to withstand two sets of quad-effective spikes upon entering the battlefield. Though in the end, there is a reason one of these Pokemon is regarded as legendary, while the other is only pseudo-legendary. And so when Dragonite finally runs out of Fire Blasts, Heatran is able to capitalize on this, bombarding its foe with rocks and burying it underneath an impromptu cairn, which stands as a memorial to its hopes of victory. Now Scott is down to his last Pokemon, though Ash doesn't have to guess what it is, with the sunglasses-clad man bringing forth his Ho-Oh, who trolls majestically as it rises into the air. Knowing Heatran won't be able to last much longer, Ash tells it to put everything it has into a Magma Storm, while Scott has Ho-Oh meet this with a Sacred Flame. A second later, Liquid and Plasmatic Fire meet in mid-air, with the resultant steam being enough to turn the entire arena into a sauna. Though even in the haze, no one misses what happens next, as the radiant glow of Sacred Flame clearly breaks through the Magma Storm, bathing Heatran in celestial fire and taking it out of the fight. Recalling Heatran with his thanks, Ash then looks to Pikachu, asking if he's ready for this rematch, with the electric rodent flashing his cheeks in a way that makes it clear that just like his trainer, he knew it would come down to this in the end. Pouncing onto the battlefield, Pikachu is assailed by Frothorn spikes just like his teammates, with him taking the super effective damage Scott had warned of, though even still he stays strong, readying himself as Ho-Oh prepares another Sacred Flame. However, here Ash and Pikachu have a little surprise for the Frontier boss, as when Ash has his buddy fire off a Thunderbolt to counter the flames, it does what Heatran's Magma Storm couldn't, and counters it, causing both moves to dissipate in the air. Grinning broadly, Scott comments that Ash has really grown a lot since their last battle, though they'll have to see how Pikachu handles another Brave Bird. Matching his boss's grin, Ash tells Pikachu to use Volt Tackle, with the mouse coating himself in a golden aura as he shoots up into the air, just as Ho-Oh is coming down. As a result, the pair of Pokemon clash in midair, their respective auras growing as they try with all their might to force the other back. Unfortunately, neither can manage this feat, with both taking more and more damage, both from their continued contact with the other's attack, as well as recoil from their own, until finally when the air pressure between them grows too great, they are pushed away from each other, rendering this clash a stalemate, just like the last one. However, Ash would not be the frontier brain that he is if he could not adapt to this situation, and so wanting to make use of Pikachu and Ho-Oh's close proximity, he orders an Iron Tail, which his starter is happy to carry out, dropping his electric cloak in favor of a glowing sheen for his tail. Alas, now it is Ash and Pikachu's turn to be surprised, as Scott reveals that he and Ho-Oh have actually been working on a new move, inspired by how much damage Iron Tail did to them in their last bout, telling his almighty Phoenix to meet Iron Tail with Iron Head. At once, Ho-Oh's head crest takes on a steely shine, similar to Pikachu's tail, with the two metallic appendages clashing a moment later as the sound of steel on steel rings out. Briefly, it appears as though this will prove to be a stalemate, just like all the other exchanges, though there is one key difference here, with that being that Pikachu is far more experienced with Iron Tail than Ho-Oh is with Iron Head. This becomes obvious as the electric rodent is able to position himself in a way that applies additional pressure to the Firebird's head and neck, forcing it to relent and allowing Pikachu to strike it in the back of the neck. This only compounds Scott's shock at how much Ash and Pikachu have grown, with him having Ho-Oh perform an aerial turn so it can blast the rat with Sacred Flame at point-blank range, hoping this will be enough to finish him off. Though, as if sharing a mind, Pikachu immediately goes into Volt Tackle before Ash can even get all the words out, with his protective coating allowing him to propel himself into the flames and come out the other side unharmed, striking Ho-Oh between the eyes and causing it to squawk indignantly as the little yellow bottle lands atop its beak. Seeing victory right before them, Ash turns his cap backwards, then in a voice brimming with confidence and excitement, calls for a Thunderbolt, which Pikachu happily obeys, briefly giving giving Ho the same golden hue it had the day they first met, though for very different reasons. However, this is not where the onslaught ends, as with Pikachu going all out, the electrical discharge quickly grows until it becomes an all-consuming aura which briefly blinds everyone as their whole world is transformed into a wall of shining yellow. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it fades, leaving just Pikachu and Ho-Oh, both of whom are falling out of the sky. With an earth-shattering crash, the rainbow Pokemon then strikes the battlefield, plowing a mighty trench as it comes to a stop at Ash's feet, clearly unconscious, while atop it stands a battle-worn but unmistakably ecstatic Pikachu. Letting out a cry, Trainer and Pokemon then run to each other, with Pikachu leaping into Ash's arms as the boy spins him around before wrapping him in a hug and calling him the best. From a small distance away, Scott grins that he believes that title belongs to both of them, as there is no doubt they have surpassed him and Ho-Oh. The Frontier boss then makes his way to Ash to shake his hand, though not before he gratefully pats Ho-Oh's head and returns it to its ball with his sincerest thanks. When the two trainers meet, they both wear matching smiles, with Scott once again congratulating Ash on his victory and claiming that not only is he the strongest brain, but the strongest trainer he's ever met in all his travels, and perhaps even the strongest in the world. Rubbing the back of his head modestly, Ash grins that he's not sure about that, since it was really his Pokemon who did all the hard work, as on his shoulder, Pikachu cheers proudly, earning him a laugh from his trainer, who fondly pats his head. This display of affection makes Scott smile, and as the spectators begin cheering their praises for the young Junction Master, Scott asks Ash what he plans to do next. For a moment, Ash thinks deeply, then as a smile reforms on his face, he laughs that he'll probably just keep doing what he's been doing, taking on challenges at the Battle Junction, and keeping up his training so he never stops improving. Laughing now too, Scott replies that it's this mindset that makes him the best. Then, as the pair shake hands at last, it is as equals. And that's where we'll end the story of What If Ash Became a Frontier Brain. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And I will see you as the journey continues.